So anywho, we have the mainstream media putting the attention back on the balloons every single possible way they can figure it out, whether it's overt messaging or covert messaging. Don't stop paying attention to balloons. Now, and by their own admission, conspiracy theorists are right that the balloons are distraction. So on this same track of balloons and trains and ecoterrorism, let's talk about the trains, okay? The trains. They just keep happening in a similar fashion that we've seen the balloons. The balloons were like, oh no, we found a balloon. And then we found a balloon every day.
Yeah,
we shot down balloons every day for 4 days. It's been a couple days since we've shot down a balloon.
Yeah.
However, in the almost the exact same pattern, we've been seeing these train crashes. And I think there's a potential for some covert eco-terrorism when it comes to these train crashes.
Or eco-vandalism. Maybe it's just eco-vandalism.
Could be eco-vandalism, could be ecological terrorism, could be eco-terrorism. I don't know. There's all sorts of possibilities. But let's get into the trains for a second.
Okay.
So first of all, the Ohio, back to the original East Palestine, Ohio, continues to be a disaster. I mean, and the health issues keep mounting up. The conspiracy keeps rolling. Over here at abcnews.go.com, we have this headline: East Palestine, Ohio resident weighs in on fears following train derailment and chemical spill. Just a couple notes from here. Ben Ratner has spent a lot of time thinking about what it would be like to survive a freight train chemical disaster. After all, he appeared in a movie about it.
We talked about this guy, the same Ratner guy we talked about the last episode with the CNN article.
Exactly. So as we sort of move through this, and this came out yesterday, this coincidence that the eco disaster being predicted in a movie that came out just months ago.
Months ago, yeah.
And the exact same thing actually taking place months later after the movie. It did occur to me, we were kind of confused about the earnings of the movie only being $34,000. Somebody mentioned that it's because it was just released on streaming services, maybe not a theatrical release.
Either way, it doesn't matter. It's still not that much money.
Daily Mail here has Ohio residents hit by a wave of sickness after train carrying toxic chemicals exploded and engulfed surrounding neighborhoods in black smoke. Let me give you a little bit of this. Health concerns for Ohio residents are growing after a train carrying toxic chemicals crashed and engulfed surrounding neighborhoods in black smoke. East Palestine resident Melissa Henry told the Associated Press her youngest son's eyes turned red as a tomato, and he was coughing a lot before the family evacuated to her parents' house outside the evacuation zone. Another resident in North Lima, roughly 10 miles from the train derailment, had her 6 chickens die days after the chemical fire started. Taylor Holzer, a registered fox keeper, who lives outside the evacuation perimeter, told WKBN that his foxes were ill and one had died. Dead fish were also spotted in waterways around the scene after the incident. 50 Norfolk Southern Railroad freight train cars carrying toxic vinyl chloride derailed in Columbia County at around 9 p.m. on Friday, February 3rd. So this train disaster really is sort of being described as this eco-terrorism, putting chemicals that are not just affecting people, but affecting animals. I saw a video of just hundreds of fish floating to the top of these creeks, these rivers, these ponds, animals being taken out just by whatever they're breathing in the air. Very, very concerning situation over there. If we do have any producers with boots on the ground, feel free to leave us a message or something. Tell us how things are going. Anything to mention about Ohio?
I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think the pattern will emerge as we go through here. So.
Yep. Now, after Ohio, this came out on February 13th. Monday, the last episode, this is foxnews.com, Texas train derails in collision with 18-wheeler, leaving driver dead. An 18-wheeler collided with a train on Monday morning in East Texas, leaving the truck driver dead and derailing over a dozen train cars, according to police. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office started fielding 911 calls about the wreck around 7:24 a.m. in Splendora, a small town about 40 miles north of Houston. When first responders arrived at the scene, the driver of the 18-wheeler was already dead. According to the Splendora Police Department, no one else was injured. The East Montgomery Fire Department said that there is no active threat to the community stemming from the wreck, putting some fears to rest after a train derailment earlier in the month sent toxic gases into the air over East Palestine, Ohio. So this is something you'll see as a theme now as we go through these many train derailments happening every day. They are all making sure to mention something about the threat or lack of threat when it comes to ecoterrorism.
Yeah, we have the standard. The standard has been set with East Palestine.
Yeah.
So now everything is compared to East Palestine, all the train crashes.
In the same exact news narrative way that every balloon is put into the context of the Chinese spy balloon. Yeah. So keep in mind the pattern here, which is the first one happens and it is horrible. You know, it's sort of the worst possible thing. Chinese balloon, you know, the first balloon, Chinese spy balloon, has explosives on board.
In our airspace.
COVID.
Yeah.
In our airspace. This is a threat, huge thing. And then every subsequent balloon is sort of less and less threatening. Same thing with these train crashes. First train crash. Oh my gosh, it's a huge disaster. People are dying. Animals are dying. It's the worst ecological disaster in a century. And each subsequent train crash is sort of less and less concerning. Yeah. In detail, by the way, not because they're reporting it as less, you know, I don't know, not like they're ignoring facts about the severity. They just also happen to be less and less severe, which I think is an interesting detail.
Okay. Well,
any thoughts about that before we get on to the next crash?
Let's just keep moving.
Okay. WSAZ.com. Truck driver dies in crash between train tractor trailer. Yeah, okay. So another tractor trailer and train crash, this time in Ashland, Kentucky. Ashland Police Chief Todd Kelly confirms the driver of a dump truck died after the truck was struck by a train. It happened Tuesday, so a day after, at the 42nd Street crossing. The truck driver was turning onto it from Winchester Avenue, Kelly says. The collision took place right across from the Ashland Fire Department's Station 2. Firefighters heard the crash and rushed across the street. Quote, there was nothing they could do, Ashland Fire Department Deputy Chief Stephen Alley said. Quote, it was a very traumatic, catastrophic incident. A crossing bar and lights are located at the crossing, Chief Kelly says. They and CSX crews are investigating what the status of those were at the time of the collision. Right now, this is a quote, that's part of our investigation. So they're trying to see if the crossing bars were up or down or whatever. There was an update here. The truck driver died. Did they figure out what happened? No word. Nope. Yep. That's the extent of the updates. So you have another truck and train collision. Have we heard anything yet about the Ohio train derailment and what may have caused it?
Not really. I haven't heard much.
I haven't seen one yet.
Yeah. The reporting was scarce to begin with. I mean, they only started reporting on it because everyone started making a big deal about it online.
Give it a little goog if you can, real quick. On top of that, today, people.com, evacuation, shelter in place orders issued after deadly crash spills nitric acid on Arizona freeway.
Oh, yeah.
Was this a train or was this a truck? The shelter in place order was temporarily lifted Tuesday evening, but reinstated Wednesday following a temporary setbacks overnight, according to state officials. Officials in southern Arizona have issued evacuation and shelter-in-place orders after a truck carrying hazardous chemicals overturned on a local freeway. So this is not a train, but this is related in the chemical disaster aspect of it. and you can kind of, I don't know, relate. I mean, a lot of these trains crashes obviously have to do with truck drivers, and yet here we have a truck driver having an enormous nitric acid spill in Arizona. And then here, coming from loading, there it is, TulsaWorld.com. They gave an update to this one. That's nice. Update. All clear issued after fire brought under control at Port Catoosa. An all clear has been issued after the fire was brought under control at Port Catoosa. The fire was reportedly shortly after 9 a.m. at a storage tank. This is the storage tank explosion on the north end of the channel, according to Tulsa Port's director, David Yarborough. He said he would not speculate on what was in the tank or who it belongs to. He is unsure what caused the fire or what was in the tank, which is estimated to be about 30 feet tall, big tank. With prevailing winds out of the west, a hazmat alarm was sounded, prompting an evacuation. About an hour and a half later, roads and gates were reopened at the port after the fire was put out, Yarborough said. Rogers County Emergency Management, Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and Tulsa Fire Department were among responding agencies. No injuries reported. They still don't tell us what was in this tank.
That's what's weird about it. They kind of just, it's a tank. They don't know who owns it.
It was a chemical fire.
Fire.
Specifically
hazmat
a chemical
alarm
fire.
Going off. So, I don't know, man. There's all of a sudden, there's attention drawn to chemicals just being spilled everywhere. It's just a weird thing. I mean, the train thing is part of it, but I think the theme that we're starting to see is the chemical aspect, whether it's there or not in some of these.
It was interesting. I believe it was an article about the Texas train crash, where they very specifically were like, don't worry about any chemicals. There were some chemicals spilled, but it was just some like consumer level Windex cleaning supplies or something. Everything being put in the context of the original train disaster. Which, have you found a cause for that yet?
So there's the Hill is they have a little thing. It looks a little deeper than I'd like to go with it, but the Hill had an article, 5 lingering questions over Ohio train derailment, and there's a little segment in here titled "Did lax regulations help cause the crash?" And they talk about the possibility of brake failure, which caused it to derail. And so it truly does seem like a maintenance type of issue where it just got old and the train fell off and had a big, pile up and explosion and all that stuff. So it really doesn't look like it was, at least the way they're talking about it. They're talking about it in terms of legislation and lack of oversight to, advance the technology to of trains and yada, yada, yada.
So you have this balloon emergency happening throughout the world, and it's the biggest deal that could ever possibly be. And then we have the Mexican eco-terrorist balloon company who, against the orders of the American government, are going through with their rogue balloon eco-terrorism. And then subsequently, you have the issue with the train derailment, which, look, if there was somebody trying to do carry out an act of eco-terrorism, this would have been a pretty impressive one. We have not heard much about it yet. And then we have report after report, train crash after train crash, explosion after explosion, trucks involved in almost all of them. Of this sort of rash of possible eco-terrorist activity. Now, I'm not saying I know anything else that is, that would have to do with this, but as we analyze and deconstruct the news cycle here over the past now almost 2 weeks, it seems to have a very clear trajectory. One interesting thing that occurred to me, and it has now occurred to a lot of people, is there's one man that has, it's sort of his responsibility to to respond to these sort of things. The guy in charge of things like truck
the
problems, train problems, he's the guy, is Pete Buttigieg.
Hey, booty.
Yeah,
hey,
and he actually took...
to set up Pete Buttigieg, let me just read a little segment here from The Hill. About 4.5 million tons of toxic chemicals are transported through U.S. communities every year by rail, and 12,000 trains carrying hazardous materials cross through towns and cities each day, The Guardian reported. Quote, the Palestine wreck is the tip of the iceberg and a red flag. Ron Kaminkow, a former Norfolk Southern freight engineer and secretary for the Railroad Workers United, told The Guardian, quote, if something is not done, then it's going to get worse, and the next derailment could be cataclysmic. Yes, the infrastructure is failing us.
And we've drawn the connection between the railroad accident, and I think it's interesting how we have not found any sort of foul play or anything yet, but it is sort of being put on poor maintenance, poor staffing, poor performance by kind of the railroad workers. Shortly after Biden's forcing railroad workers back to work after they were threatening a strike, there's Biden and Pete Buttigieg both played a part in threatening blue-collar workers back to work under threat of jail to continue working under horrible conditions. We mentioned last episode how Biden just seems to have the most coincidental timing with his things.
We recall the article from the New York Times, which we covered at the time, which is about a year ago. Pittsburgh bridge collapses hours before Biden infrastructure visit. And we were like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Biden was going to go visit this bridge. And then just hours before, talking about the infrastructure crumbling, the bridge collapses? Wow, this guy, man, he's a prophet.
It wasn't, and this was while he was trying to get his infrastructure bill passed. This was his big thing, his infrastructure bill, and he was going to go visit this bridge, but the bridge collapsed before he could visit it.
Right about a year ago, January 28th of 2022 was when this was reported, so literally a year ago.
Yeah, and now we have Biden and Pete Buttigieg threatening jail on rail workers to get them to not strike and to accept a bad deal from the railroad corporations. And just a month or two later, we have the biggest train wreck disaster in a while that spans, it spans all sorts of topics.
Very useful.
I don't know. It's just weird. It's just weird timing. But anywho, Pete Buttigieg, who's the transportation secretary, which that's a whole nother funny commentary, but people were kind of confused as to why Pete Buttigieg has not made a comment on the train derailment. That is literally his job. He's the U.S. transportation secretary. Technically, balloons and trains both his... This is his responsibility, and he had almost entirely ignored it. And he's given speeches since the train derailment, and he was not mentioning anything about it. But we do have CBSNews.com here. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg comments on East Palestine train derailment. U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg has finally commented on the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, that took place 10 days ago. 10 days it took him to make a comment, and we will see what his comment is. But it took him 10 days to decide to finally do his job. Secretary Buttigieg took to Twitter. Good. His first comment is on Twitter on Monday night, saying he remains concerned about the families impacted. Here's his tweet.
That's a nice little pitch there by CBS. Remains to suggest really subtly that he had concern the whole time.
Don't worry, I've been concerned the whole time, even though I didn't say anything. His tweet says this: I continue to be concerned about the impacts of the February 3rd train derailment near East Palestine, Ohio, and the effects on families in the 10 days since their lives were upended through no fault of their own.
Ooh, whose fault is it?
Kind of weird to point that out. But
so whose fault is it there, Pete?
It's important that families have access to useful and accurate information. He wants them to make sure they have access to useful and accurate information.
Useful and accurate propaganda. Don't just read stuff on the internet. Make sure it's the proper stuff.
Buttigieg went on to say that the EPA is, quote, on site and monitoring indoor and outdoor air quality to test for VOCs and other chemicals of concern. Okay, I'm glad they're there. It sounds like the chickens have done enough testing of that, but it goes on. The EPA has screened more than 290 homes and didn't find anything.
Oh.
Cool EPA. You have chickens and foxes and fish and
everything's dying, but hey, there's no concern. The monitors aren't saying anything.
Screened homes and haven't found anything. They have another 181 homes to go. They do have this nice little piece at the end. If you want your home screened, click here for more information so you can get your home screened there.
You know what's going to happen? I can see it already. Pete Buttigieg is going to come out. He's going to say, we're going to demand masks instead of N95s.
A mask mandate.
We're going to get another mask mandate from all these chemical spills, but it's going to be, like a gas masks, the real dystopian end times type of deal.
Hazmat mask.
Hazmat level. But people are going to say, it doesn't really save you from vinyl chloride. And then others will say, it doesn't matter.
Start this whole thing over again.
It's a talisman for compliance with Pete.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. I don't think this is the culmination.
No.
I feel like whatever this cycle is working towards is still to come. Now we do have the presidential election starting to ramp up with different campaigns starting to announce. What's the person's name? Christie something or other.
Nikki Haley.
Announced. Nikki Haley, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Nikki Haley just announced. There's been talk about Pete Buttigieg, maybe going for a run or being considered.
Newsom's trying to make moves.
Yeah, lots of people trying to make moves. So this could, be an interesting opportunity for Pete or just a nail in the coffin. Yeah. We don't know. But this certainly isn't over. We're going to keep an eye on the news cycle. I think there's going to be more to this.
Buttigieg is 41 years old. I was trying to see it. He seemed like he was a young guy. So.
Yeah. He's could be you, man. Could be you.
Could be me. Wow, the life that could have been.
Life that could have been.
Politician.
Could have been the Secretary of Transportation during this is probably the past 3 years or 2 years has probably been the most difficult time for a Secretary of Transportation in the history of the U.S. Maybe rivaled by 9/11, and after
I'd say 9/11 was probably pretty bad too. But
there was the whole thing over Christmas, the airline industry totally collapsing. Yeah. Now you have the train derailments, you got the balloons. I'm sure Pete thought this was going to be a cushy gig, and unfortunately it's not turning out that way.
No, they gave him the memo when they took his blood, Yeah.